My name is Claire, and on the morning of my wedding, I learned what it feels like when your heart shatters in one single text. The dress was heavy on my shoulders, layers of white fabric pooling like spilled milk across the hotel carpet. I stared at the glowing screen in my hand. The words blurred, yet each one pierced deeper than a knife. I can't walk you down the aisle. Marissa's event is too important. I'll try to make the reception. I read it again, then again. My father, my anchor after Mom's death, my so-called protector, was abandoning me on the most important day of my life. The bridal suite suddenly tilted. My bridesmaids froze mascara wands, mid-air curls, half-pinned. I could not breathe. The walls seemed to close in my chest, tightening like a vice. The diamond on my finger weighed heavier than a stone, a promise about to begin, while another lay shattered. I hurled the phone. It struck the wall with a crack, then slid to the floor. A collective gasp erupted. "Claire, what happened?" Tara whispered. But no words came. Only silence pressing against my ribs until I thought I would collapse. The wedding planner Melanie swept in clipboard, clutched voice brisk. She paused, catching the tension in the air. I managed to choke out the truth. He's not coming. My father. The man who once promised he would always be there for the milestones. The lie echoed in my ears. And just like that, grief transformed into rage. Rage that burned not just for today, but for years of broken promises. I remembered a funeral, 17 years earlier, my hand in his voice trembling as he said, "It's you and me now, Claire. I'll never let you down." That vow had carried me through lonely teenage nights, through college exams, through every holiday where I longed for my mother's warmth. Now, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror, mascara streaking my cheeks, I realized the vow was dust. All because Marissa, the golden child, his favorite, snapped her fingers. I wanted to scream, to pound the vanity until glass shattered. Instead, I clenched my fists against the satin folds of my dress. The clock ticked mercilessly toward 4 in the afternoon, the hour when I should walk arm in arm with my father into a new life. Instead, I was left alone. The weight of humiliation pressed hardest. Guests downstairs expected to see a proud father at my side. How would I explain, how could I smile through photographs that would forever capture his absence? Tears stung, but beneath them, a fire flickered. Maybe this was not the end of the story. Maybe it was the beginning of something different. Because here's the truth I would learn that day: family is not always the one who shares your blood. Family is the one who shows up when the world falls apart. That realization had not yet arrived in full, but the seed had been planted. And though the morning broke me, the day would forge me anew. The silence in that bridal suite was suffocating. My bridesmaids exchanged worried glances, their eyes darting between the shattered phone on the floor and the streaks of black mascara running down my cheeks. I could barely form words. My chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. Every second felt like an eternity. Tara finally spoke, her voice soft but urgent. "Claire, you need to tell us what happened, please." I swallowed the words, scraping my throat like glass. "My father, he's not coming." The room erupted. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Another bridesmaid let out a gasp that sounded like a sob. And there I stood, trembling, my heart slamming against my ribs as if trying to escape. Melanie, our planner, stepped closer, clipboard pressed against her chest, as though she could shield herself from my pain. Not coming, but the ceremony, every detail, we built it around him, walking you. Her words only drove the knife deeper. I pressed my palms against the vanity, trying to anchor myself, but my reflection blurred through tears. "He says Marissa's event is more important." I spat the words, my voice brittle and foreign to my own ears. The rage bubbling inside me carried with it years of disappointment. My father had promised to be there for the milestones, but Marissa had always known how to bend him. She could crook her finger and suddenly I became invisible. I thought today would be different. I thought I would finally come first. A memory slammed into me the night Ethan and I announced our engagement. Dad had leaned across the kitchen table, wedding magazines spread between us. His hand covered mine, eyes warm with sincerity. Nothing would make me prouder than walking you down the aisle. I believed him then. God, I wanted to believe him. But now that moment felt like another cruel illusion. The walls of the suite seemed to press closer. Dresses rustled as my bridesmaids shuffled, unsure what to do. One of them whispered, "Is there anyone else? An uncle, maybe? Or, will you walk alone?" Alone. The word echoed hollow and merciless. Could I really walk alone on a day meant to symbolize unity, love, family? The thought made my stomach twist. My phone buzzed where it lay, cracked on the carpet. Jessica bent, retrieved it, and pressed it into my trembling hand. The screen flashed with a familiar name, Uncle Martin. My father's older brother, the man who had never once let me down. Every recital, every graduation, every moment that mattered, he had been there. I swiped to answer, my voice breaking. "Hello?" "Claire." His tone was warm, steady, but laced with concern. "Your father just called me. I don't know what to say, sweetheart." Tears spilled unchecked. "He's not coming, Uncle Martin." Silence stretched thick and heavy before he replied, his voice taut with anger. "I know, and I am so sorry. But listen, would you allow me the honor of walking you down the aisle?" The words lodged in my throat. Something inside me cracked, then softened. My knees nearly gave out. "You'd do that for me?" "In a heartbeat. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do not worry about a thing." I ended the call, clutching the phone to my chest as fresh tears fell, but this time they carried a flicker of hope. My bridesmaids gathered close, their relief palpable. The suffocating despair loosened its grip, replaced by something steadier. I straightened, smoothing the crumpled folds of my gown. "My Uncle Martin is coming," I announced, my voice stronger than before. "He will walk me down the aisle." The room seemed to exhale as one, shoulders relaxed, eyes softened. Jessica let out a breath she must have been holding for minutes. Tara squeezed my arm, whispering, "See, you won't be alone, not today." For the first time since reading that awful message, I felt the ground beneath my feet again. Maybe my father had chosen my sister, but I would choose the ones who chose me. And you watching my story right now, I need to ask, have you ever had to face a moment where someone you trusted broke their promise? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and share if you've lived something similar. And if you want to stand with me through the rest of this story, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. 'Cause this is only the beginning. So, the clock kept ticking toward 4 in the afternoon. I adjusted my veil with shaking hands, each breath steadier than the last. Uncle Martin was on his way. And though my heart still ached, a new truth was taking root. Sometimes, family isn't defined by who you're born to, but by who shows up when it matters most. The minutes after Uncle Martin's call stretched long and heavy, yet they carried a different weight than before. No longer suffocated by abandonment, I began to breathe in the faint promise of rescue. Still, the ache lingered. How could it not? This was supposed to be my father's role, a moment daughters dream of, their whole lives stolen in a single text. As I sat at the vanity fingers tracing the delicate lace of my gown, memories clawed their way back. Not the sweet ones, but the ones that stung, the ones that built the truth I had refused to face. 17 years earlier, I stood at my mother's casket. My hand was swallowed in my father's as mourners drifted past. He squeezed it tight, voice rough with grief. "It's you and me now, Claire. I'll always be there for the important moments." At 13, I clung to those words as if they were scripture. But life had proved him a liar. The cracks had shown even before this day. 9 months ago, when Ethan and I announced our wedding date, my father smiled like the proudest man alive. We sat at his kitchen table, bridal magazines scattered, his hand warm on mine. "Nothing would make me prouder than walking you down that aisle." My heart swelled with hope. For once, I believed I could count on him. 3 months before the wedding, the first warning came. Marissa called to announce her career celebration on the exact same day. Dad brushed it off as bad timing, promising it would work out. "Your ceremony's at 4, her event isn't until 7, I reminded him. He hesitated. "But the drive is 45 minutes. 2 weeks later, his tone changed. Traffic could be bad that weekend. Then Marissa really needs family support for this promotion. Each excuse chipped away at the promise he had once made with shining eyes. I begged, I compromised, I even offered to hire a car service. Each time he assured me he'd manage both. Each time I believed. And now 3 hours before my vows, his choice came in the form of a text message. No phone call, no face-to-face explanation. Just a few cold lines that cut deeper than any knife. As these memories washed over me, Jessica sat nearby, twisting her hands together. Her lips trembled like she wanted to speak, but wasn't sure she should. I turned to her, voice brittle. He promised Jess. After Mom died, he swore it would always be us. He lied. Tara leaned closer, eyes flashing with anger. No father worth the name would put a career party over his daughter's wedding. Claire, this isn't on you. It's on him. The rage beneath my grief simmered hotter. They were right. Yet a hollow part of me still longed for him to burst through the door to say it was all a mistake. But reality had already delivered its verdict. I thought of the milestones he'd missed, not just today, like the night of my scholarship award at MIT. I scanned the auditorium, heart pounding, searching for his face. He never came. Later, he blamed work. But months afterward, I overheard his assistant mention Marissa had called him away. She claimed I'd wanted to reschedule, lies layered over lies. It was always her, always Marissa pulling the strings and him too weak or too willing to resist. I stared at my reflection, red-rimmed eyes, framed by a bridal veil meant for joy. Maybe I had been blind, refusing to admit what everyone else saw. Maybe today wasn't the first betrayal, only the final straw. I looked around the room. My bridesmaids Melanie with her clipboard, Jessica still holding back tears. They all waited, holding their breath as though afraid I might crumble entirely. I straightened my spine. No more excuses, I whispered almost to myself. The vow surprised me, but it felt right. No more rescheduling my life for his half-hearted promises. No more sacrificing my happiness on the altar of his approval. And I want to ask you something, because maybe you've been here too. Have you ever held on to a promise long after it was broken? Have you ever excused someone over and over until you realized the truth was plain? They were never going to change. Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters here. My bridesmaids leaned closer, their presence a circle of quiet solidarity. Uncle Martin's words echoed in my mind. I'll be there in 20 minutes. That steady promise was enough to keep me upright. The clock ticked closer to 4. I pressed a trembling hand against the cool surface of the vanity mirror. For the first time in years, I began to see clearly. My father's promises were just words, but Uncle Martin's footsteps were already on their way. And I knew then today would not be defined by who failed me, but by who showed up. Mike. The air in the bridal suite felt heavy, as though every breath carried the weight of 17 years of favoritism. The truth had been circling me like a hawk all morning, and now it swooped down with sharp talons. This wasn't just about today. It was about Marissa, my sister, my rival, the golden child who had always managed to twist our father's devotion until there was nothing left for me. I remembered the Sunday dinner 3 months before the wedding. The roast chicken on the table had gone cold because my father couldn't stop glancing at his phone, waiting for Marissa's call. When it finally came, he pushed peas around his plate, his eyes avoiding mine. She scheduled her promotion event for the same day as your ceremony, he said. His tone was flat, like it was a random inconvenience, not a bomb detonating inside my life. I tried to stay calm. The ceremony is at 4. Her event is at 7. That's 3 whole hours, Dad. He muttered something about traffic. I reached for his hand, desperate. Please, this is my wedding. I need you there. He squeezed my fingers, gave me a soft smile, and said, Of course, sweetheart. We'll make it work. But over the weeks, that assurance crumbled. Each conversation brought new excuses. The drive might be longer than we think. Then she really needs our support this time. And finally, I'm not sure about the timing. He never said outright that he would choose her over me, but every hesitation carried the truth. I heard it in the pauses, in the guilt seeping through his voice. What I didn't know then, but would soon discover, was that Marissa had been planning the sabotage from the very beginning. She didn't just schedule her event, she manipulated it, moving dates, shifting times, pulling strings until my father had no way to keep both promises. Marissa had been perfecting this game since we were kids. After Mom died, she positioned herself as the new woman of the house, cooking dinners, controlling schedules, whispering in Dad's ear until my voice could barely reach him. I was 13 and grieving, desperate for connection. She was 16, strategic and ruthless. With every passing year, she built a wall between me and him, and he let her. Even in college, she had sabotaged moments meant for me. That scholarship award ceremony at MIT wasn't just a random absence. She called him lied that I didn't want him there, and he believed her. Or maybe he wanted to believe her because it was easier than facing me. And now on the day that was supposed to be mine, she had pulled her cruelest trick. She didn't want to share him. She wanted to erase me to make my wedding day about her, just like she had done with every other milestone of my life. I sat at the vanity fury, rising to join the grief. My bridesmaids whispered among themselves, their faces tight with outrage. Jessica muttered, "She's been doing this for years, hasn't she?" I nodded, my voice low and bitter, always, and he lets her. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. It carried all the years of lost birthdays, missed recitals, forgotten graduations. Each absence a brick in the fortress Marissa had built around him. But this day my day would not be surrendered to her cruelty. I pushed back from the vanity, my chair scraping against the floor. The sudden sound startled everyone, but it steadied me. My voice came out firm, sharper than I expected. "She may have taken him from me, but she won't take this." Heads turned, eyes wide. For the first time, I felt control shifting. I wasn't just the abandoned daughter anymore. I was the bride who would stand, who would not be erased. The clock's ticking grew louder, as if reminding me that the ceremony approached. Somewhere beyond these walls, guests were finding their seats, unaware of the storm raging above. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This was no longer about Marissa. It was about me. About who I chose to be when the person who was supposed to love me most had already chosen someone else. And I chose not to crumble. So, Uncle Martin's promise echoed in my mind, steady and unshakable. He was coming. He would be here. And in 20 minutes I would walk down that aisle, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who finally stopped chasing approval that was never hers to begin with. Because today wasn't Marissa's victory, it was mine. The ticking clock above the vanity felt louder with each passing second, like a drum beat warning me that time was running out. But this time, my heart didn't sink as it had before. There was something different now. Uncle Martin was on his way, and that promise, solid, unbreakable, gave me a thread to cling to. The bridesmaids surrounded me in a quiet circle. Their whispered comfort filled the silence, but nothing could mask the sting of betrayal still burning in my chest. I picked up my veil, draped it carefully over my head, and forced myself to breathe slowly. I could not let Marissa's scheme ruin me. Jessica stepped forward hesitantly. Her hand shook as she held out her phone. "Claire, there's something I need to show you." My stomach twisted at her tone. She unlocked the screen, pulled up a thread of messages, and placed it into my hands. The words blurred at first, but then they sharpened into daggers. They were texts between Marissa and Jessica, mistakenly sent to the wrong Jessica in her contacts. "Marissa, Dad's still wavering about the wedding. Keeps talking about making it work. Jessica." "But he promised Claire, right, Marissa? Don't worry. I know how to keep Dad to myself on wedding day. Already working on it." I felt my breath leave me in a rush. The room tilted sideways, and I sank onto the vanity stool. "She planned this," I whispered. Jessica's face was pale, her voice trembling. "I didn't know if I should show you. I didn't want to believe she'd actually sabotage your wedding day." But I could believe it. I had always known deep down that Marissa thrived on erasing me. She wasn't content with being the favorite, she needed me forgotten. Tara knelt beside me, fury flashing in her eyes. "Your sister is cruel, and your father is worse for letting her do this." I nodded slowly, the truth pressing down on me. This was not an accident. This was war, and I was done being the casualty. The sting of betrayal burned, but behind it rose something else. Determination. If Marissa wanted me broken, she would fail. If my father wanted me silent, he would be disappointed. Today was about Ethan and me, about love, about the family I was choosing, not the one that abandoned me. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan, his name glowing across the cracked screen. I read the words through tears. Whatever you need today, I'm here. Even if that means waiting. I love you. My chest tightened, but not with despair, with gratitude. Gratitude for the man who had chosen me every single day since the moment we met. Gratitude for the family I was about to marry into a family that had already shown me more warmth than my father ever had. I looked up, my reflection blurred but steadier. She won't win, I whispered more to myself than anyone else. The bridesmaids nodded as if they had been waiting for me to say it. Melanie tapped her clipboard, her voice gentler now. Then we moved forward. This day is still yours, Claire. Do not give it to her. I inhaled deeply, straightened my spine, and lifted my chin. I was not the forgotten daughter anymore. I was a bride about to claim her joy. And to you watching, have you ever faced someone trying to sabotage your happiness? Have you ever had to fight to keep what was yours? If you believe no one deserves to have their moment stolen, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now and share your story below, because your voice may be the encouragement someone else needs today. The veil shimmered under the soft glow of the dressing room lights. I touched the diamond ring on my finger, the promise that still stood strong despite the storm. Uncle Martin would arrive any moment, and when he did, I would walk down that aisle with my head high. Because this day, my day, was not defined by who tried to break me. It was defined by the people who loved me enough to stand beside me, and I would not let Marissa take that away. Jessica's phone was still in my hand, its glow cutting through the dim bridal suite like a cruel spotlight. The messages stared back at me, undeniable proof of what I had feared all along. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't coincidence. It was sabotage, carefully crafted by the sister who had been pulling strings my entire life. My voice came out hollow. She wanted to make sure he chose her. She planned it. Jessica's eyes glistened with regret. Claire, I should have told you earlier. I just couldn't believe she'd actually go through with it. I thought maybe it was just her venting, just being... Marissa. The word Marissa dripped with bitterness. It wasn't just a name, it was a history. A history of me standing in the shadows while she basked in the spotlight. I closed my eyes and the memories flooded in. 4 years ago, I stood in an auditorium at MIT clutching my award certificate for the National Computer Science Scholarship. My heart raced with pride, scanning the audience for my father's face. He had texted that morning promising he was on his way. I believed him. I believed he would be there for once. But as the ceremony ended, my eyes kept searching the crowd and finding only strangers. He never came. Later he apologized, saying work had pulled him away. Months afterward, his assistant casually mentioned that Marissa had called that day, insisting I wanted to reschedule his visit because I was too nervous for him to attend. A lie. A deliberate theft of my moment. My chest tightened as more memories poured in. I was 13 when Mom died, raw with grief and desperate for comfort. Marissa, 16 at the time, slipped seamlessly into the role of lady of the house. She orchestrated dinners, handled Dad's calendar, and slowly carved out her kingdom. It was subtle at first, her voice guiding his decisions, her presence in every corner of the house. Before long, she had turned him into her ally, leaving me stranded on the outside. Every time I needed him, she was there first. Every holiday, every birthday, every celebration. She built her empire by erasing me. I opened my eyes and handed the phone back to Jessica. My voice was steadier now, edged with steel. She's been doing this for years, and he let her. Tara placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice fierce. Your father is blind, Claire. And your sister, she's worse than selfish. She's cruel. The truth settled into my bones. It wasn't just about today. It was about a pattern so deeply rooted it had shaped my entire relationship with him. And the worst part, I had allowed myself to keep hoping. Hoping he would finally see me. Hoping he would finally choose me. But the texts left no room for illusions. Marissa hadn't just manipulated him into skipping my ceremony. She had manipulated my life, and I had been too desperate for his love to face it. I looked in the mirror, my veil trembling with the rise and fall of my breath. My reflection was red-eyed broken, but somewhere behind the devastation, I saw a flicker of something else. Strength, clarity. I whispered the words aloud, tasting them like bitter medicine. No more. Jessica leaned closer. What do you mean? I mean no more begging, no more waiting for him to show up. If he wants to be her father, let him. But I'm done being invisible. The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air like a vow. For once, it didn't feel like I was the powerless one. It felt like I was drawing a line, a boundary that had been too long in the making. Tara squeezed my shoulder. Good, because you deserve better than this, and today you're going to get it. I nodded slowly. Uncle Martin was on his way, and with him came proof that family wasn't about who abandoned you, but about who arrived when the world fell apart. I straightened, wiping at my smeared mascara. I would fix my face. I would fix my smile. And when those chapel doors opened, I would not walk as the forgotten daughter of Robert Parker. I would walk as the bride who refused to let her sister steal her future. The storm inside me had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and sharp, but it was no longer in control. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than betrayal. I felt free. The sweet had grown too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every breath sound like a confession. I stared at my reflection again, mascara-smudged veil trembling against my shoulders. The silence pressed down, but underneath it a steady pulse began to rise. It wasn't despair anymore. It was defiance. I stood the satin of my gown rustling like armor. My bridesmaids looked up startled by the sudden movement. She's been doing this to me since I was 13, I said, my voice sharp, every syllable slicing the air. She stole Dad's attention after Mom died. She sabotaged my scholarship ceremony. And now she's stolen this. But it ends today. Jessica exchanged a glance with Tara, both of them nodding slowly. You're right, Jessica said, her voice firm. You can't let her win. The words echoed inside me. You can't let her win. For years I had been playing by Marissa's rules, chasing after crumbs of approval my father tossed my way. I had shaped my choices around what would please him, what would avoid conflict with her, and in the end it had only broken me. But Uncle Martin's voice rang in my memory. Would you allow me the honor of walking you down the aisle? That promise was more than comfort. It was a reminder that I was not alone, that I never truly had been. I had just been too focused on the man who kept failing me to notice the people who never did. I walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. Outside, guests were gathering on the lawn, their laughter drifting upward. They had no idea of the war raging in this room, no idea that the father of the bride had chosen absence. For a moment, bitterness rose again. How many of them would whisper about it later? How many would say her own father didn't even show up? But then I let the curtain fall back into place, let them whisper, let them speculate. The truth was uglier than gossip, and I was done hiding it. I turned back to my friends, my voice steady. I won't give her my day. This is mine. And if Dad chose her, then I choose me. The words felt strange at first, but then powerful. A vow not just for today, but for every day after. And now I want to turn to you. Yes, you listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? If your sister tried to sabotage your wedding, if your father abandoned you, would you fight to take back your joy? Or would you let them steal it? Tell me in the comments. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs right now. The room shifted. My bridesmaids weren't just pitying me anymore. They looked inspired, like they were seeing a version of me I hadn't shown before. Melanie scribbled something on her clipboard, muttering, "We'll adjust the schedule if we have to. Don't worry, Claire. This day will still shine." Her words anchored me further. Maybe the ceremony wouldn't go as planned. Maybe the photographs would tell a different story than I had once imagined. But maybe, just maybe, it would be better, because it would be real. It would be mine. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway pulled our attention. My heart jumped. Could it be him, Uncle Martin? The door opened, but it was only a hotel staff member delivering a tray of water bottles. Still, the anticipation reminded me he was on his way. And with each tick of the clock, hope grew stronger. I pressed my hand against the cool surface of the vanity mirror one last time. No more letting them decide what I remember. No more letting them take what belongs to me. The others gathered close, their arms brushing mine, a circle of solidarity. It was a reminder that I wasn't walking through this alone. For the first time that day, a small smile tugged at my lips. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain had vanished, but because I knew, truly knew, that Marissa's game had finally lost its power over me. Today would not be remembered as the day she sabotaged. It would be remembered as the day I stood tall anyway. And somewhere down the hallway, the sound of firm, steady footsteps drew closer. My rescue, my proof of love was almost here. The knock at the door was softer this time, almost hesitant. Melanie peeked inside her headset tilted around her neck, her clipboard tucked tight against her chest. "Claire," she said carefully, "Mrs. Carter is here. She's asking if she can see you." For a moment I froze. Ethan's mother. The thought of facing her elegant, composed a woman who had lived through decades of family traditions made my stomach twist. What if she looked at me with pity? What if she saw me as the bride abandoned by her own father? But then I nodded. Let her in. Catherine Carter entered like a calm tide. Her pale blue dress shimmered softly under the chandelier, her posture graceful, her eyes filled with a kind of warmth I had almost forgotten existed. The moment she saw my tear-streaked face, her lips parted and her expression collapsed into sorrow. "Oh, Claire," she whispered, crossing the room with quick steps. She took my hands in hers, her grip firm, steady, and maternal. "Martin called me," she explained, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm so sorry." That was all it took. The tears I had been holding back returned with force spilling down my cheeks as I clutched her hands. She guided me to the small love seat against the wall, and together we sank into the cushions. My veil pooled around me like a heavy shadow, but her presence felt like sunlight piercing through. "I don't understand," I confessed, the words raw. Why would he do this to me? Why would my father choose her again? Catherine's gaze softened, carrying a wisdom etched by years of her own battles. "When I was 28, my father refused to attend my wedding," she said quietly. My head snapped up, startled. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He didn't approve of our interfaith marriage." I waited until the very last moment, hoping he'd change his mind. But he never came. Her voice carried the weight of old wounds still tender despite the years. For a long time after I twisted myself into knots trying to win his approval. Holidays, birthdays, even the births of my children. I rearranged everything, hoping he'd finally show up. He never did. And every time, it broke me a little more. My chest tightened. Her story mirrored mine in ways I hadn't expected. "So what did you do?" I whispered. She squeezed my hands tighter. "One day I stopped waiting. I stopped chasing love that was never freely given. That was the day I started living." Her words landed like a stone in my heart, sinking deep. How many years had I wasted waiting for my father to see me? How many milestones had I ruined by clinging to the hope he might show up? I thought of Ethan's family dinners, the way Gregory pulled out my chair, the way Catherine remembered my favorite dessert from a single casual mention. I thought of the way their family had welcomed me not as an outsider, but as one of their own. That was what family was supposed to feel like. I wiped at my cheeks, my voice trembling. I've been chasing his approval my whole life, and all it's ever given me is heartbreak. Catherine's eyes glistened, her smile sad but resolute. "Then don't give him that power anymore. Today is not about who failed you, it's about who chose you." The truth of her words settled into me like a new spine holding me upright. I sat taller, inhaling deeply, letting the weight of her wisdom replace the ache of betrayal. The clock on the wall ticked louder, reminding me the ceremony was minutes away. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running out of time. I felt like I was reclaiming it. I turned to Catherine, gratitude brimming in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered, "for saying what I needed to hear." She smiled softly, brushing a stray hair from my face. "Your father may have left you standing, but you are not walking alone. Martin will be here soon, and so will Ethan, and so will I." Her words wrapped around me like a promise, a reminder that the story of this day was still mine to write. But I looked back at the mirror. My face was blotchy, my mascara ruined. But beneath it all, I saw strength beginning to shine through. This wasn't the picture-perfect wedding I had imagined. It was something better, something real. And when the music started, I knew I would walk down that aisle not as a daughter abandoned, but as a woman who chose joy despite the pain. The clock on the wall seemed to grow louder with every tick mocking me with the inevitability of time. 10 minutes until the ceremony. 10 minutes until the doors would open and I would step into a new life, whether my father was there or not. I pressed my hands against my lap, feeling the weight of the gown, the smooth satin folding between my fingers. Catherine's words replayed in my head like a mantra. Today is not about who failed you, it's about who chose you. Then, as if summoned by fate, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down and saw Ethan's name glowing across the cracked screen. My breath caught as I read his message. Whatever you need today, I'm here. Even if that means waiting. I love you. Tears welled again, but they were different this time. Not the hot tears of betrayal, but softer ones of gratitude. Gratitude for the man who never once hesitated. Gratitude for the family I was about to step into, who had already proven themselves more reliable than the one I had been born into. I whispered to Catherine, my voice firmer now. I don't want to wait. This day isn't about who isn't here. It's about Ethan and me and the people who chose to show up. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. Then let's get you ready. Jessica and Tara moved quickly, dabbing at my makeup, straightening the veil, smoothing out the dress. Each touch was a reminder that I wasn't alone. Around me, hands worked with quiet determination, building me back up piece by piece. And then came the knock, firmer this time. The door creaked open, and there stood Uncle Martin. His tuxedo was slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled from rushing, but his eyes shone with such fierce love that my chest tightened. He stepped inside breathless and froze when he saw me, his lips parted. "Look at you," he said, his voice catching. "Absolutely beautiful." I rose from the love seat, my veil brushing the carpet, my heart hammering with relief. Without hesitation, I stepped into his arms, letting the strength of his embrace steady me. "Thank you," I whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for everything." He pulled back his own eyes glassy. "Nothing could have kept me away, sweetheart. Nothing. I love you." The words pierced through me, healing places I hadn't realized were bleeding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. With careful fingers, he opened it to reveal a strand of pearls glowing softly in the dim light. "These belong to my mother," he said, voice rough. "She wore them at her wedding in 1952. I've kept them safe, waiting for the right moment. And this is it." I covered my mouth, my breath catching. "Uncle Martin, I couldn't." "You can, and you will, because you are family, real family, and she would have wanted you to have these." Jessica stepped forward, helping clasp the necklace around my throat. The cool pearls settled against my collarbone, their weight grounding me, connecting me to a lineage of strength. As Martin adjusted the clasp, his voice softened. "Your mother is here too, Claire, in these pearls. In that handkerchief she left for you, in your heart. She never really left you." A sob broke free, but it wasn't only sorrow, it was release. For the first time that day, I felt not abandoned, but carried. Not erased, but seen. Melanie appeared at the door with her clipboard. "Guests are seated, the music is starting. It's time." Martin extended his arm. "Shall we?" I took his arm, feeling its solidity, its steadiness. I wasn't walking alone, not anymore. And yet as we moved toward the chapel doors, a question haunted me like a shadow. Would my father appear at the last moment? Would he burst through offering apologies too late? Would Marissa's grip on him snap under the weight of truth? I didn't know the answer, but I knew the next few minutes would decide not just the memory of this day, but the meaning of family for the rest of my life. And before I take that walk, I need you with me. Stay until the end, because what happens at the ceremony will change everything, not only for me, but for the people who thought they could sabotage my joy. The doors loomed before us, the music swelled, my fingers tightened around Martin's arm, and then with one breath we stepped forward. Akanarix. The chapel stood quiet, bathed in colored light spilling through the stained glass windows. It wasn't filled yet, only the photographer adjusting her tripod, and Melanie walking briskly up and down the aisle, clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. The silence of the empty space felt sacred, but also heavy. Martin and I stepped inside, his arm firm beneath my trembling hand. For the first time in hours, the chaos outside my heart slowed. The scent of polished wood and faint lilies hung in the air. My heels clicked against the tiled floor as Melanie turned to us. Let's practice the walk she instructed. We'll go slowly, get the pace right for the music. We lined up at the back of the aisle. The long stretch of carpet before me suddenly felt endless, like a road I wasn't sure I could finish. My breath hitched. Martin must have noticed because he covered my hand with his own. We'll take it step by step, he said, together. The photographer crouched, snapping test shots as Melanie gave the signal. Martin and I took our first practice steps. My pulse thundered in my ears. Each footfall seemed to echo louder than it should, filling the empty chapel with reminders of who wasn't there. I glanced at the rows of vacant chairs, imagining the faces of guests soon to arrive. My chest ached at the thought of my father's absence carved into every photograph. After the third walkthrough, we paused at the altar. My throat tightened. I'm afraid I admitted voice barely above a whisper. Martin turned to face me. His eyes were soft but unwavering. Afraid of what, sweetheart? That when I look back on today, all I'll remember is who wasn't here. The words fell heavy between us, trembling with the raw edge of truth. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a small folded square of fabric. A handkerchief worn but clean, embroidered with the initials LMP. He pressed it into my hands. I looked down, startled. These are Mom's initials. He nodded, his voice rough. Linda Marie Parker. She gave this to me before she passed. She told me, one day you might need it. The handkerchief trembled in my hands. A faint scent of lavender clung to the fabric, and suddenly I felt my mother's presence, as if she had been waiting for me here. My tears blurred the stained glass into kaleidoscopic colors. Martin, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, he replied. His hand tightened around mine. Family shows up. That's all there is to it. The truth of his words filled the hollow places in my chest. For years I had been aching for my father's approval, waiting for him to show up, bending myself smaller every time he didn't. But here was Martin's steady, unshakable present. He was showing me that real family was built by presence, not promises. I pressed the handkerchief to my cheek, inhaling deeply, grounding myself in its history. For the first time, I realized today could be remembered for something beautiful. Not abandonment, but resilience. Not loss, but the love that chose to stand beside me. The photographer lowered her camera. The light is perfect now. Let's try one more shot. I smiled faintly, surprising even myself. My hands were steadier when I slipped my arm through Martin's again. As we took our places, I asked him quietly, "Do you think Mom would have approved of Ethan?" Martin's lips curved into a knowing smile. She would have loved him. And she would have loved you in this dress, standing tall despite it all. He paused, squeezing my hand. So in a way, she is here too. My throat tightened again, but this time with gratitude. Gratitude for the man beside me, for the pearls around my neck, for the handkerchief in my hands, and for the truth finally shining through the cracks of my broken heart. And now I want to ask you, yes, you hearing my story, have you ever faced a moment where the people you expected to show up simply didn't, and yet someone else unexpected became your anchor? Instead, tell me in the comments. I want to hear about the people who chose you, the ones who proved family is more than blood. The chapel doors creaked open, faint chatter drifting in as early guests arrived. Martin straightened his tie, his presence solid as stone. Almost time, he murmured. And for the first time that day, I believed him when he said everything would be okay. The hum of voices drifted into the chapel as more guests began to arrive, the murmur building like a tide against the silence Martin and I had just shared. I clutched the handkerchief tighter, the soft cotton warming in my palm as though carrying my mother's reassurance. We stepped out of the aisle to make room for the ushers, guiding people to their seats. Through the half-open doors, I caught glimpses of summer dresses in pastel shades, men adjusting ties, children twirling impatiently in their tiny suits. The world outside this room didn't know the storm that had nearly swallowed me whole. To them, it was a perfect wedding day. Back in the bridal suite, my bridesmaids scrambled to adjust their bouquets, line up their heels, and take their assigned places. Jessica touched my elbow gently. "Your makeup is holding up," she said with a small smile, as though reminding me I looked stronger than I felt. Tara added, "And your eyes, don't hide them." Let people see the fire in them. Their words steadied me. I stood taller, smoothing my gown with slow, deliberate motions. Each breath I took was measured, intentional, as if anchoring me in this new decision. I was no longer begging for my father's approval. I was claiming my place exactly as I was surrounded by those who had chosen to be here. The hotel staff came in with glasses of water and trays of mints. I took a sip, the coldness cutting through the tightness in my throat. "Are you ready?" Melanie asked, her clipboard against her chest like a general's command log. Her voice was softer now, stripped of the professional edge. She saw me not just as a client, but as a woman fighting to stand tall. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Martin adjusted his boutonniere, his fingers steady. He looked over at me and nodded once as if to say, "You're not alone. I've got you." That single gesture carried me further than any speech could. The string quartet outside began tuning their instruments. The faint strains of violins drifted in through the cracked door, the notes like sparks catching on dry wood. This was it. The moment I had feared, then longed for, then feared again. Jessica squeezed my hand before taking her place in line. Tara followed her bouquet of roses, trembling slightly as she exhaled. One by one, my bridesmaids slipped into the hallway, ready to walk before me. The corridor outside was bathed in golden afternoon light. The sun angled perfectly through the estate's tall windows. Alone with Martin for a brief second, I turned to him. My voice trembled, but my words were steady. "When I walk out there, people will notice. They'll see who isn't by my side. I can't stop them from whispering." He reached out gently, straightening my veil, his touch paternal grounding. "Let them whisper," he said firmly. "What they'll remember is who is here, and more importantly, what you chose to do with today. Walk with pride, Claire. That's what your mother would want." The truth of his words sank deep. I nodded, pressing the pearls at my neck. The cool beads reminded me of legacy of love carried forward even when the person was gone. The doors opened slightly wider. The music changed, signaling that the processional was moments away. Guests shuffled into place, the murmur settling into an expectant hush. My heart pounded, not with dread this time, but with the weight of what was about to begin. I breathed in once, then twice, steadying myself. My dress rustled softly as I shifted, taking Martin's arm. The warmth of his presence ran through me like steel, steady and unbreakable. We waited just behind the last set of bridesmaids, the doors looming ahead like a threshold between two lives, the one I was leaving and the one I was about to enter. I knew now that walking down that aisle wasn't just about joining Ethan at the altar. It was about reclaiming my own story. The violinist paused, then began the first notes of the wedding march. My pulse matched the rhythm. The guests rose to their feet. The air buzzed with anticipation. Martin bent closer, whispering, so only I could hear. "I've never been more honored than I am right now, not once in my whole life." The lump in my throat threatened to choke me, but I swallowed it down. "Let's do this," I whispered back. And as the doors swung open and sunlight poured in, I stepped forward, ready to meet whatever waited at the end of that aisle. The doors opened wide, and sunlight flooded the entryway like a spotlight. Every face turned in unison, rows of guests rising to their feet. My veil fluttered in the faint breeze that drifted through the chapel, carrying the scent of summer roses and polished wood. For a heartbeat, the world went still. All I could hear was the steady rhythm of my pulse and the faint strains of the wedding march echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Martin's arm was solid beneath my hand, his steps calm and measured. The contrast between his strength and the chaos in my chest was almost unbearable. I clutched the pearls at my throat, grounding myself in their cool weight. My mother's memory walked with me, as did the uncle, who had never once failed me. Halfway down the aisle, I looked up, and there was Ethan. His eyes locked on mine, and tears streamed freely down his cheeks. But they weren't tears of pity. They were tears of recognition, gratitude, love so pure that it silenced every whisper in the room. His parents stood nearby, their faces radiant with pride. Catherine gave me the smallest nod, a promise that I wasn't walking alone. The whispers did come, though. I caught them at the edges of my hearing. Aunts shifting in their seats, cousins glancing at one another, their eyes flicking from Martin to the empty space where my father should have been. Their discomfort was almost palpable, but for once, It didn't pierce me. I let them look, let them wonder. The story they had come expecting was gone. In its place was something stronger, something truer. When we reached the altar, Martin turned to me. His aftershave, the same he had worn since I was a child, wrapped me in familiarity. He placed my hand in Ethan's, his voice carrying through the hush, with all the love of family chosen and given. The officiant stepped forward, her voice warm. Friends and loved ones, we gather today not only to witness the joining of Ethan and Claire in marriage, but to recognize the sacred role of those who stand beside us when it matters most. Some bonds are forged through blood, others through choice. Both can be equally sacred. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, soft but undeniable. For the first time that day, I felt the weight of judgment lift. They weren't only seeing who wasn't here, they were seeing who was. The ceremony unfolded like a dream, vows spoken with trembling voices, rings slipped onto shaking fingers, a kiss that sealed promises stronger than any betrayal could undo. Martin stood nearby like a sentinel, a living reminder that abandonment could not define me. Later at the reception, the DJ's voice boomed across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Carter, escorted by their beloved Uncle Martin. Thunderous applause erupted. The lights twinkled above us, like stars' flowers spilling across every table in bursts of color. For a fleeting moment, I felt like the heroine of a story rewritten in real time. When the father-daughter dance was announced, dread prickled across my skin. My chest tightened. Another tradition waiting to expose the absence. But before I could falter, Martin stepped forward, offering his hand. Just for a minute, he said, his eyes kind, then your husband can take over. The music began, What a Wonderful World, and we swayed together. His posture was formal at first, but then it relaxed, his movements easy and sure. The tension I had carried all day began to dissolve with each turn on the dance floor. Thank you, I whispered. He shook his head gently. No thanks needed among family. For the first time, my heart eased into something close to peace. I was safe in the arms of chosen family, surrounded by people who wanted me, who stood by me. And yet across the ballroom, something stirred, a shift in energy. Guests began turning their whispers sharp and curious. My stomach dropped as I followed their gazes toward the entrance. There he was, my father. Standing in the doorway, his suit rumpled, his tie crooked, his eyes scanning the room like a man arriving far too late to a story already written. So, what do you think will happen when a father who abandoned his daughter's wedding tries to walk back into the celebration? Stay with me, because the truth that comes next will not only expose him, but also reveal the full depth of Marissa's betrayal. The music played on, but in that moment, I knew the real dance was about to begin. The music still played, but the atmosphere had shifted. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses, eyes darting toward the entrance where my father stood. For a moment, he didn't move, just lingered like a shadow on the threshold. His suit hung awkwardly, his tie askew. He looked less like the confident man I grew up with, and more like someone who realized too late what he had lost. Ethan's arm wrapped protectively around my waist, steadying me. Do you want to talk to him? He asked softly. I shook my head, throat tight. Not here, not now. But my father stepped forward anyway, weaving through the crowd with hesitant steps. Conversations died in his wake. By the time he reached me, the room was silent. His voice cracked as he tried to explain. Claire, the traffic. It was brutal. I tried calling, but you weren't answering. I held his gaze, my face calm, though my heart pounded. I was getting married, I said simply. The words cut through the silence like glass. He glanced around, taking in the decorations, the twinkle lights draped across beams, the joy radiating from every corner of the room, joy he had chosen to miss. His shoulders slumped. You could have made this easier, pushed the ceremony back an hour, made it easier for who I asked. My voice was cold, now steady. For you, for Marissa, or for me, the bride you abandoned. Before he could answer, another voice cut in, stronger, sharper. Actually, everyone should see this. It was Daniel, my cousin, normally lighthearted, easygoing. But tonight his face was grave as he approached, phone in hand. He didn't bother lowering his voice. I thought you both might want to see what Marissa's really been up to. He held out his screen for all to see. Messages filled the display, heading to Murphy's for drinks. Dad skipped Claire's wedding for this, so you better show up. Attached were photos Marissa and a group of friends at a bar, cocktails raised, smiles wide. The timestamp 4:30 p.m., the exact moment I walked down the aisle. A ripple of shock spread through the room. Guests leaned closer, gasping. My father's face drained of color. "That's her big career event," I asked, my voice rising. Daniel swiped to the next screenshot. "A text from Marissa to someone named Jen. Dad will have to choose between us. I'll make sure he chooses me." The room went deathly quiet. My chest felt hollow, the final piece of the puzzle snapping into place. She hadn't just pulled him away, she had orchestrated every detail to guarantee his absence. Daniel wasn't finished. He scrolled further, showing calendar invites Marissa had changed multiple times, aligning perfectly with every adjustment Ethan and I had made to our wedding date. "She moved her party 3 times, he explained grimly. "Each change landed right on top of your schedule. This wasn't an accident. It was sabotage." The crowd erupted in murmurs, eyes snapping back to my father. He looked stricken, staring at the evidence in Daniel's hand as if it might burn him. "I didn't realize," he began, his voice breaking. "Claire, if I had known—" I cut him off. "If you had known, you would have what finally shown up. Kept your promise for once in my life." My voice rang louder than I intended, echoing across the ballroom. Guests froze, the silence sharpened by the weight of my words. I felt the invisible strings snapping, the ones that had kept me tethered to his approval, to my endless need for him to choose me. They broke clean, leaving behind only clarity. I drew in a slow breath and let it out steady. "You made your choice when you started looking for excuses weeks ago. Tonight, I make mine." He flinched at the words, shoulders curving inward. For the first time, he looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, just a man who had failed. Uncle Martin moved closer, a quiet wall of dignity. He touched my father's elbow, his voice low but firm. "She deserves this day without more drama. Whatever conversation you want to have, save it for tomorrow." My father's mouth opened, then closed. He gave a faint nod and let Martin steer him toward the far corner of the room. I didn't follow with my eyes. I didn't need to anymore. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. "Are you okay?" I nodded, a strange calm settling in. "Yes, better than okay. For the first time, I'm free." The DJ cleared his throat, eager to move the night forward, and music swelled again. Guests turned back to their tables, some still whispering, others clapping in quiet support. And now to you listening, what do you think? Should I have given my father another chance in that moment, or was I right to finally cut the strings? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever had to stand up to family for your own happiness, subscribe and stay, because the ending of the story might just change how you see your own. The dance floor filled once more, but my heart felt lighter. The battle had been fought, and though scars remained, the victory was mine. The music swelled around us, couples spinning across the dance floor, but for me, the world had narrowed to the corner where my father stood. His presence loomed like a storm cloud that refused to pass. I could feel his eyes on me, following every step I took, every smile I tried to give Ethan. It was only a matter of time before he came back. And then he did. He approached slowly, weaving between tables, his face pale, his tie hanging loose, as though he had lost the will to hold himself together. When he stopped in front of me, the chatter around us dimmed again. "Claire," he said, my name breaking in his throat. "I need to explain." I rose from my seat, my legs steady though my heart pounded. "Not here," I said firmly. But he shook his head. "Please just give me a moment." His voice cracked under the weight of desperation. I didn't know Marissa had lied. If I had? "If you had," I interrupted, my voice sharper than glass. "If you had known you would have what kept your promise, stood beside me like you were supposed to." His eyes darted nervously to the guests around us. He straightened, trying to recover some authority, but it was too late. The truth had already stripped him bare. "I want to apologize," he announced, his voice loud enough to reach nearby tables. "I made a mistake." The words rang hollow. My stomach turned at the performance, the attempt to repair his image rather than repair the wound he had left in me. "No," I said, my voice steady, ringing across the sudden quiet. You didn't just make a mistake tonight. You've been making this choice for years. The silence deepened. Even the band faltered strings, trembling uncertainly before fading out. Every eye was on us. My father swallowed hard, his jaw clenching. I've tried. No, I said again, firmer now. You tried when it was easy. You showed up when it didn't cost you anything. But when it mattered most, you chose her. Again and again. And tonight, you chose her over me. His face crumpled, a flash of pain breaking through the mask. Claire, please. I felt something inside me snap. The invisible strings that had kept me bound to his approval, kept me chasing after scraps of affection. They broke clean, and the release was both terrifying and liberating. I don't need your explanation, I told him. I don't need your excuses. Tonight I finally see the truth. He blinked, stunned, as though he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe for the first time he was seeing me not as the daughter he could control, but as the woman who refused to be erased. Guests shifted in their seats, their discomfort thick in the air, but I no longer cared. Let them witness this. Let them see the end of a cycle 17 years in the making. I spent my life waiting for you to choose me, I continued, my voice carrying. But I'm done waiting. I'm choosing myself now. And I'm choosing the family who chose me. Martin appeared, then his hand resting lightly on my father's arm. His voice was quiet, but unyielding. She deserves this day without more drama. Whatever you have to say, save it for tomorrow. My father's shoulders sagged under the weight of Martin's words. He looked at me one last time, his lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came out. Finally, he let Martin guide him away toward the far corner of the room. I turned back to Ethan, my chest rising and falling with the force of everything that had just passed between us. His eyes searched mine, filled with both pride and concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, and for the first time that day I meant it. "Yes," I whispered, "I really am." We returned to the dance floor as the band picked up a new song. Ethan's hand found mine warm and steady. Around us, guests resumed their laughter, their dancing, their celebration. But for me, something had shifted forever. The pull of my father's approval, the ache that had haunted me since I was 13, was gone. Pain remained, yes, but so did freedom. Some wounds never truly heal, but sometimes acknowledging them is the first step to building something better. And tonight, in this room filled with chosen family, I finally took that step. I agree. A year later, autumn sunlight streamed through the wide bay windows of Ethan's parents' home, painting the living room in shades of amber and gold. The crisp air outside carried the scent of fallen leaves, but inside the house, warmth pulsed from every corner. Laughter drifted from the kitchen where Catherine checked on the roast and Gregory polished glasses at the table. I smoothed the small corsage of white roses on my wrist, the same flowers from my wedding bouquet, and instinctively placed a hand on the gentle swell of my belly. Our daughter shifted beneath my palm, a flutter that still startled me with joy every time. Ethan leaned close, wrapping an arm around my waist. His lips brushed my ear as he whispered, "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Carter." Guests gathered around the coffee table where Gregory opened a large photo album. "Thought you might like to see how much family we've packed into 1 year," he said, grinning. The pages revealed snapshots of holidays: Thanksgiving with too many people crowded around the table, Christmas morning with Martin, teaching Ethan the proper way to carve ham Easter with me, nervously setting out the good plates. Each photograph glowed with love and chaos, with belonging. I lingered on one picture, 4th of July, the grill smoking, as Dad nearly set his sleeve on fire while trying to flip burgers. That day had been awkward, filled with apologies that came too late, but it was a start. One coffee meeting had turned into family dinners, each gathering, laying a small brick in the tentative bridge between us. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It was something gentler, slower. "Has Marissa called recently?" Catherine asked, her tone careful. I kept my voice neutral. "Not since she moved to Florida. She sent a card when we announced the pregnancy. That's something, I suppose." Martin cleared his throat from his armchair by the fireplace. The lines on his face had deepened this year, but his smile remained steady. He reached beside him and lifted a carefully wrapped package, I have something for you both, he said, handing it to me with hands that trembled slightly. I peeled back the paper to reveal a delicate cream-colored baby blanket, the yarn soft and intricate. My breath caught. It's beautiful. He nodded, his voice thick. Alice knitted it before she passed. She told me it was for the next generation whenever that time came. I think she'd be glad to know it's finally here. My throat tightened. Though I had never met Martin's wife, her love reached across time through the careful stitches in that blanket. Another reminder that family could transcend blood, even life itself. Then the doorbell rang. Ethan answered, returning moments later with my father standing awkwardly in the doorway. His hair was thinner, his eyes older. He carried a weathered photo album pressed to his chest. "Sorry I'm late," he murmured. Traffic on the bridge was backed up. The old excuse would have shattered me once. Today it only brushed past. I nodded. "We're just looking at photos. Join us." He sat gingerly on the edge of the sofa, opening his album with unsteady hands. Inside were pictures I had never seen: my mother pregnant with me, her smile radiant, her hand resting on her belly the same way mine rested now. His voice broke as he spoke. "I'm sorry. I wasn't there when it mattered most. I can't change the past. But I want to be here for your future, for my granddaughter's future." I looked at him for a long moment. I didn't promise forgiveness, but I did reach for his hand. "One day at a time," I said quietly. Later, as the camera timer blinked red, we gathered for a group photo. Ethan's arm encircled me. Martin stood proudly at my other side, and my father, hesitant but present, leaned into the circle. I placed a hand over my belly, feeling the faintest kick. Our daughter would grow up surrounded by a complicated, imperfect, but fiercely chosen family. I whispered to Ethan as the shutter clicked. "She'll know what real loyalty looks like. She'll know what it means when people show up. And that's the lesson I want you to carry listening to me now. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who stands beside you when the world falls apart. Sometimes, if you're lucky, even broken bonds can find a second chance." If this story spoke to you, if you've ever learned that true family is chosen, not forced, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. And when you finish here, watch my next story. It might just remind you again that strength often comes from the places we least expect. The photo captured that moment forever, a redefined family stitched together, not by perfection, but by presence. And for the first time, I felt whole. The night settled softly over the Carter home, the laughter from dinner fading into a peaceful hum. I slipped away to the porch for a moment, wrapping the baby blanket around my shoulders, as if it could already cradle the life growing inside me. The autumn air was crisp, the stars scattered above like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Behind me I heard the murmur of voices, Ethan's low chuckle, Catherine's gentle encouragement, Martin's familiar laugh, and even my father's quieter tone as he tried to weave himself back into the fabric of this new life. For the first time, it didn't feel like noise pressing against me. It felt like music, messy, imperfect, but real. I pressed a hand to my belly, closing my eyes. My daughter would never know the emptiness I once carried. She would grow up surrounded by arms that held her steady voices, that lifted her when she stumbled love, that did not falter when tested. Because I had finally learned what to protect, what to choose, and what to let go. The hardest lesson of all had been this: love cannot be begged into existence. It must be given, freely shown in presence, proven in action. My father had failed me in that, but Uncle Martin had reminded me that sometimes life gives us second chances through unexpected people. When I finally stepped back inside, the warmth of the living room wrapped around me. Ethan reached for my hand instantly, his touch grounding. Martin smiled at me across the room, his eyes shining with pride. Even my father met my gaze, uncertain but hopeful. And in that moment, I knew family wasn't about perfection. It was about who stayed, who returned, and who chose to show up when it mattered most.